Rome. The year is 390 BC, and Gallic warriors have just sacked the city, burning it to the ground. Rome, barely more than a collection of villages, lies in ruins. Most cities would never recover. But over the next few centuries, the Romans transformed their destroyed settlement into the largest city on Earth. With over 1 million people, marble temples towering 10 stories high, and aqueducts carrying water. 70 million people, 3 continents, 1 empire, all controlled from here. At its heart stood the Roman Forum, the beating heart of the most powerful empire on Earth. The Roman Forum, where history was made. The Forum housed Rome's most important buildings, the Curia, the Senate House, where 600 senators debated the laws that governed an empire. This building still stands today as one of the best preserved structures in the Forum. In the plaza stood the rostra, the speaker's platform. This is where Mark Antony delivered his legendary funeral speech after Julius Caesar's assassination. He held up Caesar's blood-stained toga and read Caesar's will, revealing that the dictator had left money and gardens to every Roman citizen. The speech ignited such passion that crowds cremated Caesar's body right there in the Forum. On that exact spot, Romans built the Temple of Julius Caesar, making him the first Roman ever declared a god. But perhaps the most sacred spot was the Temple of Vesta, a small circular temple where a flame burned continuously for over 1,000 years. Romans believed if this flame died, the empire itself would fall. 6 Vestal virgins tended this flame, serving for 30 years under a strict vow of chastity. Breaking this vow meant being buried alive. Yet these women held extraordinary power. They could own property, pardon prisoners, and wielded influence no other Roman women possessed until Christianity ended the tradition in 394 AD. Palatine Hill, the imperial palace. Just above the Forum, emperors transformed Palatine Hill into their personal palace complex. Augustus built the Domus. Augusti, relatively modest compared to what followed. But centuries later, Emperor Domitian thought bigger, much bigger. He constructed the Domus Flavia, a ceremonial palace with throne rooms featuring 3-meter high ceilings where he received foreign kings and held state banquets for hundreds. Next door stood the Domus Augustana, his actual private residence with bedrooms, baths, and gardens guests never saw. Domitian essentially had 2 palaces side by side, one for show, one for living. Then there was his private 160-meter stadium. The emperor could watch chariot races and gladiatorial combat without leaving home, even though the Circus Maximus seating 150,000 people was right down the hill. Apparently, that wasn't exclusive enough. The Circus Maximus, Rome's obsession. Speaking of the Circus Maximus, this was the largest stadium in the ancient world. Over 150,000 Romans packed inside to watch chariot racing, the most dangerous sport in the empire. Drivers raced at 75 kilometers per hour, crashing in wrecks so violent, Romans called them shipwrecks. Charioteers tied reins around their waists, meaning a crash meant being dragged to death. Survivors became incredibly wealthy. One famous driver earned enough to feed the entire city of Rome for a year. Romans divided into 4 racing factions: blues, greens, reds, and whites. And their loyalty was so extreme that riots would erupt, sometimes killing thousands. This wasn't just entertainment, it was obsession. The Colosseum, violence as spectacle. Rome's most famous venue was the Colosseum, smaller at 50,000 seats, but far deadlier. Here, violence wasn't an accident, it was the point. Over 300 years, an estimated 400,000 people died in this arena. Gladiators, criminals, prisoners, and slaves. Hundreds of thousands of animals were slaughtered: lions from Africa, bears from Germany, elephants from Egypt, hunted nearly to extinction for Roman entertainment. A typical day started with executions at dawn, animal hunts at midday, then gladiatorial combat in the afternoon. What made it all possible was hidden beneath the arena floor, a two-story labyrinth where slaves operated 28 elevators, sending animals and fighters through trapdoors. From the crowd's view, a lion would suddenly appear like magic. Romans never saw the machinery, just the spectacle. The Pantheon, engineering masterpiece. When Romans weren't watching blood sport, they built magnificent temples. The Pantheon honored all the gods at once, Emperor Hadrian's way of covering all his bases. The Pantheon remains the best preserved building from ancient Rome because it's an engineering masterpiece. Its concrete dome spans 43 meters with no internal supports, just a single opening at the top, called the oculus. This design has influenced architecture for 2,000 years, from Brunelleschi's dome in Florence to the US Capitol. It survived because it became a church in 609 AD, sparing it from destruction. The Temple of Jupiter, spiritual heart. Rome's most sacred building was the Temple of Jupiter, perched atop Capitoline Hill above the Forum. Dedicated to Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, the three most important gods, this is where triumphal processions ended. Conquering generals would climb the hill with prisoners, treasure, and armies to make sacrifices to Jupiter. For over 800 years, this temple was the spiritual heart of the empire, visible from across the city. Unlike the Pantheon, it didn't survive. Fires destroyed it multiple times. The Praetorian Guard, double-edged sword. Rome was built on military might, and emperors stationed the Praetorian Guard at the Castra Praetoria, their fortress just outside the city. This broke Roman tradition that forbade troops inside city limits. The Praetorian Guard were Rome's elite, 10,000 soldiers at their peak, paid 3 times more than regular troops. They served as the emperor's bodyguards. But here's the problem. They also assassinated at least 13 emperors and once sold the imperial throne to the highest bidder in an auction. The Castra Praetoria had fortified walls, not to defend against foreign enemies, but to house the most politically dangerous force in Rome. The Aqueducts, lifeline of the city. While emperors worried about bodyguards, ordinary Romans depended on something far more vital: the aqueducts. The Aqua Claudia stretched 69 kilometers from mountain springs to Rome, entering the city on massive stone arches rising 27 meters high, as tall as a 9-story building. The Aqua Claudia alone delivered fresh water to hundreds of thousands of people daily, powered only by gravity and precise engineering. Sections still stand today, nearly 2,000 years later. This was engineering at its finest. Daily life, how Romans actually lived. About 90% of Romans lived in insulae multi-story apartment buildings packed with families. These stood 5 or 6 stories high, built cheaply with wood and brick. Families shared single rooms in cramped, noisy conditions. The higher you lived, the cheaper the rent, but also no running water or kitchen. If fire broke out, you climbed narrow stairs through flames. Collapses were so common that emperors passed laws limiting building heights. Every morning, Romans headed to places like Trajan's Market, a massive complex with over 150 shops across multiple levels. The ground floor had small shops selling imported spices, fresh fish, wine, olive oil, fabrics, and pottery. Upstairs were warehouses and administrative offices where the real business of the empire happened. After work, Romans went to the public baths. The baths of Trajan covered 11 hectares and held thousands. You'd exercise, swim, sweat in hot rooms, then take a cold plunge. You'd meet friends, gossip, conduct business, maybe grab a meal. Entry cost almost nothing, so everyone came slaves, merchants, even senators. All those aqueducts fed these massive complexes, giving ordinary Romans a quality of life that wouldn't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years. Rome's legacy. 1 million people, one city. Rome was the first to do it, and they had to invent the modern city to make it work. They built insulae, the world's first high-rises. They built the Aqua Claudia, carrying 190,000 cubic meters of water daily. They built Trajan's Market, ancient Rome's shopping mall. They built the Colosseum and Circus Maximus, holding over 200,000 people combined. They built the Baths of Trajan, where everyone came to bathe, and they built it all to last. Rome didn't just build a city, they answered a question nobody else could answer. How do you make 1 million people in one city work? Fast forward 2,000 years. New York, London, Tokyo, Shanghai. Apartment buildings? Same concept as insulae. Sports stadiums? Colosseum design, just bigger. Public spaces? Roman forums and baths, modernized. Concrete? Still based on their chemistry. We've evolved the technology, but the foundation that's still Rome. Rome solved it first. We've just been building on their blueprint ever since. Thank you so much for watching. What should I reconstruct next? Drop a comment below. History explains the world you live in today. If you're ready to think deeper, question more, and learn the stories most people overlook, hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode.